Thank you all for joining and welcome to the Monarch Butterfly Conservation webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Tribal Alliance for Pollinators, an innovative model for conservation collaboration. In this webinar, we're going to learn about this native-led organization who's dedicated to monarch conservation, restoring grasslands by using locally sourced native plant seed, and working more effectively with tribes. And then some community guidelines just for the webinar series. Please stay muted throughout the webinar and keep your webcams off just for better presentation quality. And if you have questions, please submit them through the chat box. They'll be answered during a Q&A session at the end. And just a reminder to keep the chat friendly and professional. And thank you. And then if you need any tech support, please use the chat and contact myself, Catherine Woodward, or Marilyn Williams, because we are your NCTC hosts for today. So my name is Catherine Woodward on the right, and I'm a fish and wildlife biologist at the National Conservation Training Center. And NCTC is a proud partner of Monarch Joint Venture, and we're happy to continue supporting this webinar series and partnership to conserve the monarch migration. Stacy Carlson is the communications coordinator for Monarch Joint Venture and our host for today, who's going to introduce our presenters. So Stacy.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this auspicious date of 2/22/22. And for some of us, some of you, it's also 2 p.m. So that's got to be good for something. Just a couple of additional notes before I introduce the presenters. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on both the Monarch Joint Venture and NCTC websites in about 2 to 3 weeks. Our entire webinar archive is free and available to watch and contains about 7 years worth of monarch conservation webinars. It's well worth checking out. If you're joining us today, but you did not pre-register for this webinar, we would still like to count you for attendance and be able to send you follow-up resources. So please direct message myself, Stacy Carlson, with your name and email address if you did not pre-register. Thanks so much. Finally, all of our webinar presenters represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of NCTC or the Monarch Joint Venture. We are utterly delighted to have Jane Breckenridge and Brandon Gibson of the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators with us today to share their work. Jane Breckenridge is a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation and the co-founder of the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators, TAP, a native-led coalition that assists tribes with restoring native plants to their lands. TAP has created the largest native plant seed bank in Oklahoma. Jane is also the director of the Uchee Butterfly Farm located in Leonard, Oklahoma, which creates sustainable economic development for native people through butterfly farming and provides education about the need for habitat conservation. Brandon Gibson graduated from Northeastern State University with a degree in organismic biology and spent his first few postgrad years as an ornithologist. During this time, he studied and helped preserve prairie chickens in Nebraska. In 2020, Brandon joined the TAP team as program coordinator and has since been instrumental in the furthering of TAP's Oklahoma prairie conservation efforts. Jane and Brandon, we're so happy to have you. You can go ahead and once Catherine stops sharing her screen, go ahead and share your screen and take it away. Oh, you're muted, Jane.
There, we got it. Sorry, it was saying I couldn't unmute myself. And anyway, so let's.
You got it now.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem. Okay, so 1 second here. And there we go. Okay. Fazan, Jane Breckenridge, AZT, Uchee, Keda. Good afternoon. My name is Jane Breckenridge. I am Uchee. I am also Muskogee Creek and an enrolled citizen of Muskogee Creek Nation. I am the co-director of Tribal Alliance for Pollinators and TAP, and also the director of the Uchee Butterfly Farm, which is the home base for TAP. The Yuchi Butterfly Farm is located on land that was deeded to my great-grandmother, Neosho Parthenia Brown, in 1899. And it's as a part, the 160 acre allotment parcels were a compensation for taking away the millions of acres of their original tribal lands. And that particular allotment has been handed down continuously, mother-daughter in our family since that time. Her father, S.W. Brown, was born along the Trail of Tears during a removal from our homelands in Alabama. He went on to later become chief of the Yuchi tribe. The farm today is both, I think, an anchor to the past and hopefully a window to the future as we try and both preserve biodiversity rooted in the past knowledge and the history of this land. When I'm there and I'm at the farm and out in the back porch working with my high-speed internet, communicating with people all over the world about, trying to protect biodiversity, I can look over and see the hill where my grandmother was born in 1915 in a log cabin with no running water and no electricity. So we hope to always, as we move forward and with our mission of assisting native plants, people, and pollinators, to stay rooted in those past as we explore a new way towards the future. The farm today has dedicated meeting space. We are a working farm, but we are also a conservation, education, and training center to assist tribes who want to restore native plants to their lands, whether to help pollinators or for cultural reasons, or simply to bring the land back to health. We've got meeting space. We are very fortunate to have a 13-acre prairie remnant site right out our front door there that has never been plowed. There's estimated over 400 different species of plants there. It's the last true prairie remnant in Tulsa County, and it has served as a foundation for our teaching and a lot of the things we can do because having it so close. We are a butterfly farm, and we do have 2 flight houses. We've got an indoor year-round flight house, and then we've got a seasonal outdoor flight house that is landscaped with native plants and high-value pollinator plants. That is a way that people who are our visitors can see how the butterflies are interacting and get some ideas about landscaping in a more pollinator-friendly way, and also just enjoy the butterflies, because who doesn't like that? The farm has also been able to adapt our meeting and training space during the era of COVID. And so we have capacity to do outdoor education as well. The farm during the summer is the home base for a internship program with Muskogee Creek Nation. Last summer, we had 12 youth come on board and learn all aspects of native plant restoration, and actually do a lot of field work out there with tribes across the state, going out and doing native plant restoration. The farm also has approximately 20 seed production beds that where we produce native seeds, and they're also demonstration sites so that our visitors can learn more how those plants can benefit pollinators. I don't have a photo of it, but last summer we had a bee specialist out, and he documented that we actually have Bombus bimaculatus, the 2-spotted bumblebee, 2 colonies of that on the farm, and it was thought extirpated from Oklahoma since 1996. So as we have our pollinator-friendly landscaping, it's nice to be able to show that these things can work. The flagship program of the farm is Natives Raising Natives Project. It uses butterfly farming to accomplish 3 goals. The first goal is to create sustainable economic development for our citizens of Muskogee Creek Nation, particularly in the more rural and parts of our nation. They aren't, a lot of these allotments where people still live are not suitable for traditional agriculture. They're mostly scrubby blackjack and blackjack oaks and a lot of sandstone. But with butterfly farming, when we're raising native butterflies, we're working with nature instead of against nature. And many of the participants in our program are folks that otherwise might have a hard time accessing the labor force, either because of where they live and there aren't job opportunities, or maybe they have a disability of some kind. You have all different kinds of people, different challenges, but it's been a real positive for people to be able to participate in the program. The second goal of the Natives Raising Natives project is to use the butterflies that are raised in the program to give the kids a hands-on science opportunity as participants, and they're actually raising these butterflies. What we see a lot is, because every household that participates in Natives Raising Natives also has children or grandchildren in the home, living in the home. Our teachers here, I think we've got the 49th lowest paid teachers in the United States. So there's a lot of challenges, and our Native people are underrepresented in those science and STEM fields at university level and beyond. So we can't fix that, but what we can do is get kids that might not otherwise have this opportunity for science enrichment, or maybe they don't even know they like science. Maybe they not want to love textbooks, but when the kids start working with the butterflies, it opens up all sorts of windows in their mind. The third goal of the Natives Raising Natives project is to use the native butterflies to raise awareness of the need to support and protect and restore the ecosystems that support them. So that used to be an equal part of the mission. At this point, it's taken over quite a bit of what we do. So we do outreach and engagement at a lot of places where other people weren't, everywhere from running butterfly houses at state fairs to working with smaller tribes in more remote parts of the state. And what we see is that, we can all talk about loss of biodiversity and threats to pollinators and a lot of these issues, and people kind of glaze over and tune it out. But when people are actually interacting with these butterflies raised in the program, these beautiful native butterflies, and you can tell them these may be gone forever soon if we don't get busy and do something about it, it really engages them. And that's what we're looking for, is stakeholder buy-in. So the story of TAP begins with Yani, the butterfly, a butterfly, or rather actually hundreds of millions of butterflies that, as everybody on this call knows, went missing from the population. Monarch numbers have continued to crash for some time, since a high in 1996, 1997, but it hit its lowest point in the winter of 2013, 2014. We knew with the work that we were doing with tribal leadership that there was widespread support for this. And that was really important, because when USDA released the map of the priority zones for recovery, Oklahoma was right square in the middle of it. And unfortunately, we also have the distinction of having the most degraded habitat of anywhere else along the migratory path. Our grasslands underwent conversion to non-native grasses after the Big Dust Bowl. We've had too much drought, too much overgrazing, too much chemical use, and not enough care taken to restoration over the years. We're not a wealthy state. So here we are, critical zone on the monarch migration path, and the worst habitat along there. But Oklahoma has a unique situation in that we are home to 39 federally recognized tribes that were removed here to Indian Territory during the 19th century. Most of the monarch migration route is under dual jurisdiction with tribes and other entities. So we reached out to Monarch Watch and said, hey, we want to build a monarch migration trail on tribal lands through Oklahoma. Can you help us? We had met Chip Taylor at actually a butterfly farming conference back in 2013. And he said, yeah, it's a great idea, but what's going to limit you is the capacity issue. And that's, I guess, in some ways, really where TAP all begins, is because, as he explained, yeah, great intentions, it all makes sense, it's very logical, but we did not have the capacity to do this work. We didn't have the locally sourced seeds for milkweeds or for wildflowers. We did not have greenhouses that could grow these seeds out organically. We didn't have anybody that was trained in doing monarch habitat restoration. Anyway, it was a very long list of things that we did not have. But somehow we convinced him that the tribes were ready to step up to the plate and tackle the capacity issue. And all the time out there working with tribal leadership, I never once had a tribal leader ask why we needed to save the monarch. The only question I ever got was how. And so the how is the capacity issue. So we put together a coalition of 7 tribal nations that were willing to come together in a partnership to do this, along with Monarch Watch and the Yuchi Butterfly Farm, excuse me, and the Tribal Environmental Action for Monarchs began. By the numbers, how this first initial project went, which was started first, actually, thanks to a small grant from Monarch Joint Venture, and then later more significant funding from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, was 7 tribes came together. Each one pledged to restore 50 acres. Over the course of the project, which was initially planned for 2 years, it stretched into 3. 50,000 native milkweed seeds, milkweed plants were replanted on restored tribal land. 30,000 native nectar plants were produced and then restored to tribal lands. And a seed bank was created with 154 species of native plants in the seed bank. To date, it is still the largest boots on the ground monarch habitat restoration project that's ever happened in the state of Oklahoma. So as we went into creating this coalition and doing this thing that had truthfully never been done before, we had 7 tribes, which meant we really had 7 different approaches. Some of them, as I went into it, were obvious. These, you know, you've got completely different tribes. They've got different language, different culture, history, different legal status. But even beyond that, each one really took a different approach to the larger issue of how they were going to sign on and participate in the program. I assumed that each tribe would be sending representatives from their environmental department, possibly their land department, to be project leads for this work, because all tribes have pretty good sized environmental departments these days. But interestingly, with over half of our tribal partners, the lead was coming from the cultural department. And I think that's part of why this project has worked and why it continues to work, because for us, it is our most profound assertion of our sovereignty is how we treat our lands. And for that, you really need folks from the cultural department to being out there and being the leaders on this. So the downside of that is that if you've got people coming from the cultural department, they may not have had a lot of experience actually growing out plants to do restoration work. So, so we got busy. And so phase 1 was we began with representatives from all 7 tribes, and we brought them up to Lawrence, Kansas, headquarters of Monarch Watch, and did intensive 3 days of training with representatives from all 7 tribes. We trained in the classroom, and we also trained in the greenhouse, where it's Applied Ecological Services, which is a huge native plant nursery. Elliot Demler was running it at that time. They supply over 1 million native plants for restoration work every year. And most of the milkweeds for the Monarch Watch. So everybody got in and learned how to do this. So that was great. But once we got back, the hard work began. And Chip Taylor had a concept that he'd been testing for about 10 years now to do this work that he called the habitat island concept, where resources are limited as they are in our case, whether it was both financial resources and also seed resources. What he'd been doing and experimenting very successfully for 10 years was creating small habitat islands where non-native plants, non-native plants removed from anywhere from 20 by 20 to 40 by 40, remove the non-native invasives, and then go in and do dense plantings of native milkweeds, native forbs, which then in time colonize and spread out with mowing after the late in the season after the monarchs are through to have natural seed dispersal. The first year, because we were just getting going, we did have some locally sourced seed from Monarch Watch that they had from our ecoregion. They were grown out at Cedar Valley Nursery, which was a partner of Chickasaw Nation. And each tribe planted out that first year 2,500 Asclepias viridis on their lands. Because seed resources were so limited, we used plant plugs. These were grown out in a nursery until they had excellent root development before being planted on site. Planting events were fantastic. They were very, very joyful. In a day, we would have folks turn out, get 2,500 milkweed plants in the ground, thanks to the wonders of the gas auger, which was a key part of this. But we would have all the different tribes would come in to do this. We'd have people from different agencies, and most importantly, the tribal members themselves turning out to restore their lands. So we'd have youth. We would have, the youth was actually really nice to see how into this they got, because they understood the significance, not just for the butterflies, but for us about restoring our land. We got the very young kids, and we got all the way up through the top tribal leadership. That's Chief Jeffrey Standing Bear of Osage Nation. And that's not a staged shot. It's not a photo op. He's out there with those kids in that hot Oklahoma sun, planting that milkweed and telling them why it's important. And so, we saw this with all of our tribal partners. After the plants are installed, they are mulched to prevent the encroachment of non-native invasives and also to conserve water. Those first few weeks, they have to be watered with this method, probably 2 to 3 times, depending on rain. Then hopefully after about 3 weeks, they're solid enough that they can keep on going. And there's a perfect little Asclepias viridis mulched and newly planted at a Seminole Nation at Miccosukee Mission Site. One of the things that was just really cool to see on these planting events, and this is one Chickasaw Nation planting event, is how many different entities came together, not just native and non-native or intertribal, but just coming together. This photo this day down there, there's 4 different tribes represented. There's a federal agency, there's a university, there's an NGO, just to see how people could come together and make this possible is a kind of a different model of doing things. Thinking about the capacity issue, a key part of this project was developing a seed bank. First component of that is we wanted to try and get milkweed seed production of, our focus was Asclepias viridis. We worked some with in Asclepias incarnata and tuberosa, and actually in Miami did the purpurascens, and subsyriaca. But in general, our focus was on the viridis. So first year, we set up 3 sites to do seed production. This one's Osage Nation, and I will say mixed success. It turns out something that most people view as a weed is actually fairly hard to grow, but we've done it. We've continued to try and do it. It's just kind of had mixed success. What we have had better success at is wild collection of these. A lot of viridis will thrive in sites where nothing else grows. And a lot of farmers and ranchers don't like it, but in overgrazed cattle pastures, it will come in pretty thick. So we've got a lot of sites where we can collect, and that's had to be the foundation of what we're doing with that. With developing our seed bank for our native nectar forbs, that's been a more interesting task to tackle. Again, we're taking people, many of whom were not field biologists, and trying to teach them how to be native plant seed collectors. And if you've ever done this before, it's hard, because not only do you have to learn field identification when plants are in bloom, then you have to be able to identify them when the seeds are dried up and ready for collection. So like everything else, this was just an awful lot of training. And I guess it's one of the things in thinking about this project is, yes, the tribes committed their lands to do restoration work, but more importantly, they committed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time to have their staff participate in these training projects that through most of the project were monthly, probably at least once a month or more. We'd have these all-day training workshops. On this one, as you can see, there's also a, on the back right, on my screen anyway, you can see there's a video camera. Chickasaw Nation, who was really one of, out of all of our tribal partners, and everybody loved this, Chickasaw Nation contributed the most resource to the first phases of this project. They videotaped everything to create training videos that everybody could share in. And this is hosted at their cultural center in Sulphur. And that's Dr. Chip Taylor leading a class, first of all, classroom work, and followed by going out in the field and learning how to do this, not only how to identify plants, but how to properly collect them. And this wasn't just a one-time deal. This was over and over and over again, many different tribal sites, learning how to do the seed collection, building up the seed bank resources. We also got the youth involved. Train the trainer has been a key approach to this whole thing. So once we had a tribal staff trained, then we would bring the youth in to do this. This is, again, the Seminole Nation, Miccosukee Nation site. Once we had all those seeds collected, then came the less fun part, which was cleaning them. And again, this just had to do with a lot of training. That's David Carell, Chickasaw Nation, who is training people how to do the seed collection. As I said, they had started native plant restoration several years before this project started, so they were very generous in having their staff providing training to everyone. This is hosted at Muskogee Creek Nation, and you've got Margaret Sisk from Osage Nation and Elizabeth Highfield from Chickasaw Nation. Anyway, everybody coming together to learn how to do this, and again, getting the youth involved every chance that we could do. And once the seeds were cleaned and fully cleaned, which took quite a while, then we facilitated seed exchanges between tribes in the same ecoregion. And that was an important part of how we increased biodiversity at these different sites. And not only, we kept everything very strictly within Bailey ecoregion designations, but beyond that, again, we tried to keep it from tribes that were very closely located on their lands to try and keep stuff as locally sourced as much as possible. Once the seeds were done, then they were cultivated in organic greenhouses, another problem that was targeted early on for the capacity issue. Each tribe that participated, each of the 7 tribes, received a hoop house like this one. And then we set up, we germinated, so we stratified seeds. We taught people how to stratify seeds, how to germinate them, how to grow them out in the hoop house. Everything was tracked by seed lot, which was kept in a master database, still is. And then they were grown out to be beautiful, healthy little forbs before being planted out in the tribal land. A year into the project, we had that beautiful proof of concept that we were hoping for. That's Chickasaw Nation at the Cultural Center, and where they had installed some viridis plants. They were being heavily used, actually too heavily used, which supports the need of why we need more of this work done. But again, that's not a staged shot. Those are really those monarch larvae that have found those lovely viridis. So the Tribal Environmental Action for Monarchs was so successful. We had so much interest from many, many tribes to do this, that the tribal, to extend this work, the Tribal Alliance for Pollinators was born, TAP. What we did with TAP is use the lessons and methodology that training protocols, all of it that we learned during the team project, and make it available to more tribes. To date, 62 different tribes have participated in TAP programming. We provide technical training in the form of hands-on workshops and conferences. We provide supplies in terms of, we have a seed bank that is free for any tribe or tribal member to use. We have an equipment lending library that's available for any tribe to use at no cost. We have support in terms of a whole website with how-to videos. We do webinars, which are all archived. And one of the important things with this is there is no cost. There's no cost to join TAP. There's no cost to participate in any of our conferences. We actually have travel scholarships available for a lot of our programming, thanks to BIA grants. We tried to identify what the barriers were that were preventing this work being done and systematically go about eliminating them. So TAP we have traditional style formal conferences. We have less traditional conferences at the farm where we can bring people and to teach them all aspects of native plant restoration. We have hands-on training workshops in all aspects of native plant restoration. As you can see, we've got folks from FWS there. We've got people from the tribal communities. We kind of bring a lot of folks in. Germination, it's Chickasaw Nation, teaching some folks from Creek Nation how to do germination. We do field training. We're very fortunate with our location at the Yuchi Butterfly Farm. We can have a real conference with great PowerPoint, high-speed internet, all that kind of stuff. And we can bring in really great experts, whether it's a world-class PhD from one of the universities or a conservation professional. This is Blaine Stacy from who's a soil health educator from Oklahoma Conservation Department. We bring them in, and then after a lecture, they can go out and it's a living classroom, and they can apply all of those lessons that they've just learned in a classroom and immediately walk outside and be able to do that. And what we find a lot is that we're able to bring in experts that otherwise maybe tribes, the smaller tribes, could not engage with. The bigger tribes have the resources, but a lot of smaller tribes have land, but they're in a more remote location. And so maybe a world-class PhD on native bees is not going to make a trip up to Kaw Nation to give a lecture to, a few people. But if we come together and we've got 20 or 40 tribes in one place, we can bring in those experts and provide a location where people can share those resources. Those are our friends and colleagues over at University of Oklahoma, Priscilla Crawford, and Amy Buteau, and Dr. Abby Moore, teaching a class on how to create voucher specimens, because we're creating that for our seed bank now. So, you're out from the classroom and into the prairie. Every TAP event always includes lots of good food. That's pretty critical to what we do. We have a lending library of printed resources, all sorts of books about every aspect of native plant restoration. And again, any tribe or tribal member can borrow those at no cost. We're in the process, with the assistance of Amy Buteau and Abby Moore over at the Bebb Herbarium at University of Oklahoma. We're creating our own guide for field collectors as we try and improve the biodiversity of our seed banks. So what we found is that a lot of people who have access to land, they have time to do this. Maybe they're not experts in plant identification. So we're creating our own TAP guide on that to make it easier for them to do that. Language, preservation of indigenous language is something that is incorporated into all of the programming that TAP does. To us, those are so interrelated, preserving our language. Loss of indigenous languages in some way, like the loss of biodiversity. They have both lost safe spaces where they can live and thrive and be safe. So this is Yuchi Language Project. We work with a lot. Little Nahale and Ashtale Turning Heart are our first, their mother and their grandfather have only ever spoken Yuchi language to them. They're our first language speakers of Yuchi language in almost 100 years. The Yuchi's been very active in monarch conservation. They've actually, including the kids, all been down to the overwintering site. And so they were doing a presentation. Their mother and their grandfather were doing a presentation about how to incorporate monarch conservation into language preservations programs, because they've got a whole curriculum around it. But as a part of that, the kids gave a presentation in our Yuchi language about monarchs and monarch biology, and they read The Very Hungry Caterpillar in Yuchi. And anyway, it was quite lovely, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the place. TAP also has 3 native plant greenhouses, and Brandon's going to talk about that more later. But we produce every year probably 20 to 30,000 native plants and native milkweeds, which then are provided at no cost to tribes and tribal members to do restoration. We are the largest native plant producer in the state of Oklahoma. There's another view of that. Nothing fancy, but we get the job done. The greenhouses are also really important because that's a training facility. So we have tribal members throughout the state, and actually even outside the state, who come. They can come and do workshops. They can learn how they can do this on their own land. We want to really empower them and to be able to do this work. So we do that. The greenhouse is also a really important training site for our summer interns, and so that they can learn. Not only are they learning how to do plant restoration, but they're learning these horticultural skills, which can be useful in everything from building math and science knowledge to developing possibly a career down the line. Again, language preservation is central to everything we do. These are the folks from Yuchi Language Project, and they're volunteering to transplant milkweeds, and they're doing it all in Yuchi language. Our greenhouses are actually not enough. They're not enough room. So once plants are very hardy, a lot of them will come out, and we create an auxiliary growing space to just extend what we can do. One of the other things that TAP does that's very important is that we provide on-site technical assistance to tribes or tribal members that are doing native plant restoration. We're not a landscaping service, but what we will do is we can help deliver the plants. We can teach them how you prepare the site, how you install the plants, and our TAP staff. We've got Colin Spriggs and Brandon Gibson, who you'll hear from in a minute. They go all over the state, and so that's another key thing we do. We also have a lending library of equipment at TAP. This is just a small portion of it. We also have all sorts of mobile watering tanks, and everything you need to do this sort of work is available for the tribes to check out at no cost. Some of it's kind of specialized, so everything from clearing land, planting augers, seed collection equipment, backpack sprayers, mobile watering tanks, tillers, anything that is needed for this work, they can check out at no cost. And the crown jewel of the TAP effort is, of course, our seed bank, which now has over 200 species in it, all grouped by, again, Bailey's ecoregion and kept to a much finer level than that. It is the largest native plant seed bank in the state of Oklahoma. I think it's probably one of the larger ones in the regions, and it is, of course, completely nonprofit. The seeds come in there both from wild collection, both from our staff and from TAP members, and also from our seed production beds. Aided, of course, by our very, very nice mechanical seed cleaning machine, which has reduced the labor time to do that by about 90%. From our perspective, the seed cleaning machine being a great example of that, there are so many benefits that we see to intertribal collaboration. It's not a traditional model, but it's working really well for TAP. We can share technical knowledge, we share equipment, we share seeds. There are enhanced funding opportunities. A fair amount of funders would rather work with 20 tribes than one tribe. It's just a lot less paperwork, and TAP's an easy way to do that. And the other thing, and I'm sort of ambivalent about this, but is we do seem to carry more weight politically as a coalition of many nations than as individual tribes. It was a lesson from Standing Rock, quite frankly, is when we speak with one voice, even though we're all so different as different tribes, when we can speak with one voice to tell our own narrative and tell our own story, our voice is just louder and it carries farther. When we did the first planting for the kickoff of the team project, we had, it was carried by the Washington Post and Huffington Post. It was picked up by the International Wire. I don't think that would have happened with one tribe planting milkweed, but it carried a lot of voice. Actually, next in June, we're supposed to have National Geographic has confirmed they're coming out for 3 days to come observe our tribal plantings. So anyway, it's an important thing. Yeah, so this photo was taken at the kickoff planting at the Citizen for the whole team project at the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. They chose to do their planting at their eagle sanctuary because for Potawatomi people, butterflies are almost as sacred as eagles because they carry prayers to the Creator. So as Indigenous people, we have been protecting, revering, in every way, having relationships here with these creatures, these insects, these animals for millennia. Rightfully, we have earned a place at the table to be part of the conversation about what happens next with their conservation. It's just right. So in June 2020, the Supreme Court affirmed our sovereignty as Muskogee Creek Nation. And the opinion, the preface to the opinion, which was written by Justice Gorsuch, I'll just read a couple lines because they're very powerful. As he wrote, on the far end of the Trail of Tears was a promise, forced to leave their ancestral homelands in Georgia and Alabama. The Creek Nation received assurances that the lands in the West would be secure forever. Government further promised that no state or territory shall have the right to be allowed to pass laws for the governments. They shall be allowed to govern themselves. We hold the government to its word. these are beautiful words. They're eloquent words. I was so grateful to see Justice Gorsuch affirm, and the Supreme Court affirm, our sovereignty like that. And to put that in perspective for people, particularly non-Native people who perhaps don't understand that. But to me, our real sovereignty, the core of it, doesn't come from legal opinions. It comes from the fact that we have been here for thousands of years on these lands. And generation after generation after generation, we have grown up learning to protect them and be a part of them. To us, restoring land, it's not a job. It is our sacred duty to our ancestors, to our creator. To us, there's nothing more profound than we can do than how we take care of our land. Sometimes I think that can be hard for other organizations as they come in and interact with this. It's a different way of doing conservation than some mainstream organizations. But here's the thing. You need us. We've earned a seat at the table, but you need us, because the scope of what needs to be done now, not just to save monarchs, we're talking about saving pollinators, biodiversity, all of these lands. They've never been in more danger and more threats. And we're not going to get the work done that needs to be done on this scope just having, white folks in traditional conservation organizations in upper middle class urban environments. Bless them, love them, so important and powerful to have you guys on board. But this has got to be everyone coming to the table and working together. And so TAP, where we live, what our mission is to try and really bridge that gap between foundations that may not have experience with this, academic institutions, federal agencies, state agencies, environmental NGOs, all of that, to try and bridge that gap and create that safe space, because the tribes want to do this work. We've got the land base, we've got the commitment. We've had the commitment for thousands of years, but we don't always have the technical resources to get it done or the funding. So, that's our mission is TAP, is to be inclusive, not exclusive, to bridge that gap, to help people to come together to do that work. So on that note, I want to say Mado, Sadle, Yasota, and thank you to our funders who are making this work possible. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over. I hope I didn't use too much of my time, to Brandon Gibson, who is going to talk more specifically about not just the history of TAP, but what it's doing now and where it's going. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think we can hand it over to Brandon now.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my name is Brandon Gibson, and I am enrolled in the Navajo tribe. I'm also Cherokee and Choctaw as well. Grew up here in Oklahoma, went to college here in Oklahoma at Northeastern State University, got a bachelor's in biology with an organismic emphasis and a minor in environmental. And then for about 2.5-3 years, worked as a wildlife technician, studying greater prairie chickens, Henslow sparrow, house sparrows and things like that. So a lot of going out into the prairies in Oklahoma and Nebraska and looking for appropriate habitat for like tall grass prairie habitat or mixed grass and such like that. So that's sort of where I fell in love with the prairies. And then after traveling around for a couple of years, kind of wanted to come back to Oklahoma, and then just sort of lined up perfectly that this was a position. I applied, and Jane just pretty much offered me a job right away. So really thankful for that. And I've been here ever since, and I've been absolutely loving it. So much to learn here. So I'm just going to talk a bit about, Jane was, whenever she was talking like 2018 and before those times, whenever TAP was still being sort of created. I'll talk more about what I've been doing since I've started this job. So let's just start off with growing the seeds, how we grow the plants out here. Something I want to stress is that Jane sort of mentioned it, but we're not a horticultural organization. We're a true wildlife conservation organization. So we want all of our science to be sound. We want our plants to be healthy. And so there's a lot of research that goes into this, into growing these out, especially species level research as well. So stratification is what you need to do to a lot of native plants to mimic the winter cycle that a lot of these plants will go through in the wild, because It wouldn't make sense for a plant, you know, in the fall to drop all its seeds onto the ground and then have them start growing only for them to get wiped out by the winter. So they'll lay dormant in the winter and, you know, get pushed around, get washed in rain, stepped all over and such. And so stratification is just mimicking that. And so you mix some, depending on what species you're using, you'll mix it in with this thing called vermiculite there on the right. And then you'll just put that in the fridge and then you're simulating the winter cold. There's a little moisture in you mix in with the vermiculite, but yeah, it's really simple to do. We have on the left there, Eryngium yuccifolium. This is rattlesnake master. Very good pollinator plant, lots of tribal use as well throughout the Cherokee Nation. But we have 26 grams of seeds in there, and that's just a 1 Ziploc size bag. And that's going to last us, I mean, that's going to give us easily like over 1,000 plants there, plant plugs. So you don't really need a lot of space. I'm going to stress it a couple of times during my presentation, but you really don't need that much space to produce this high quality amount of plants. And so this is sort of what happens after you take them out of vermiculite. You put them in a tray like this, and we have a couple of different species there: Salvia azarea, primroses, helenium, some yarrow, and some nice rudbeckias. But again, we have a nice variety of species here, and this is taking up just a very tiny amount of space here. This is currently what we have growing right now. This is actually some of the vermiculite, and you can see the little green seedlings coming up. Those are all goldenrod seedlings right now, Solidaga altissima. And here's another example. This is actually Liatris. I believe this is Liatris picanostatia here specifically. But yes, again, not a lot of space you need to get a lot of these seedlings going, and it's not too difficult to keep these things moisture up and then just keep them until they're able to be transplanted out into the field. And this was, I think, last week as what we have right now. I think this stuff in the front closest to the camera, that is sneezeweed. And then right after that, you have some Illinois bundleflower. I really like the Illinois bundleflower. It's sort of an underrated Fabaceae plant here in Oklahoma. It's sort of just seen as a ditch plant, but it provides so much good soil amendments. I really think it should be planted around gardens a lot more. It's just that it doesn't have a super showy flower. And then in the back there, I believe that is late boneset there in the back. So this is a photo of Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly milkweed everybody loves. My favorite milkweed, nice and bright red, got those hairs all on the stems and the leaves. Super, super nectiferous for pollinators. You can see a ton of species just by sitting down and watching a milkweed, a butterfly milkweed plant in the wild for, you know, just 2 minutes. And again, we want to make sure all of our plants are healthy seedlings. We're not, because we want to make sure we're doing our methods as well as we can, because these seeds are a true resource that is something we don't want to waste. I always say that whenever I look at a milkweed or a goldenrod, is that I don't view that as any differently or any more or less complex than I would looking at a white-tailed deer or a bobwhite quail or a greater prairie chicken, because they all have these intense life histories and adaptations to their environment that's taken, you know, millions and millions of years to get to that point. So each of these plants all have different adaptations, and they all have their own preferences. And so I don't want to waste a lot of seeds just trying to, you know, I can do, you know, throw a bunch of them in the dirt outside over winter. But what's going to happen is birds, mice, they'll get washed away. Some seeds need light to germinate, so they get washed under leaf cover. And so you end up wasting a lot of seeds whenever you're just throwing seeds out into the wild. So I'm not really a fan of that. I like to grow them out much more. In the middle there, Lobelia cardinalis, our native Oklahoma lobelia, is fantastic. It produces, I can't tell you how many seeds. It's easily like over 10,000 seeds you can get off of one plant. But you don't see them that germinating all around that one plant. It's because those seeds need light and they're very tiny to get washed away. But if you take just a couple, you know, tiny little seed pods off of a Lobelia cardinalis, you can have easily over 1,000 plants, because you're giving those plants the attention and care that they need and that they wouldn't get out in the wild. So you don't need to collect a lot of seed to get these mass numbers, and you're really, really increasing the germination rate significantly. Let's see, on the left side, we have Asclepias viridis. That's the green antelope horn milkweed that Jane was talking about. Very important for Oklahoma, for the monarchs coming through in the spring. And then on the right side, we have our native hibiscus, Hibiscus laevis, fantastic one. And so after they grow in these trays here for a while, we'll transplant them into these deep cell trays. And we use these deep cell trays because a lot of our prairie plants tend to shoot their roots down first before they go out. And so they require a bit of a deeper, taller cell for them to really thrive. Grindelia squarosa is what was pictured here, and that's gumweed. I know that has a very fibrous and deep root system, so definitely a necessity for them. You couldn't necessarily use cups or they wouldn't do as well. This is another, let's see, these are all passion flowers. Big demand for passion flower. I absolutely love passion flowers. Super easy to grow. I think people mess up cleaning them, and then so they make the seeds inviable. That's something we've learned just since I've been here. This my first year growing this passion flower. I had 600 of them, 600 new of them just from seed here. So also I want to stress that I think that all of this stuff is very learnable as well. Before I started on with TAT, I've never grown anything in my life. I've never grown a tomato. I've never done any sort of gardening my whole life. So all this information is stuff that I've picked up recently. I did take some botany classes in college, but never in any of those botany classes did propagation. There was never even a mention. It was just how to ID stuff and understanding morphology terms and such like that. So learning how to grow this stuff was really, really fun for me. And I think it's very accessible as well. Again, just seeing how much space you need. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 400 passion flowers right there. And I know all those definitely, we gave out all those. I mean, they perennialized. It's a very tough plant. Here's one of our greenhouses here that Jane didn't show. This is sort of our native plant greenhouse. Everything you see in this photo is native to Oklahoma. It was collected in Oklahoma from wild locations. That's another big thing that we're really stressing, is that all of our plants that we grow, we don't order anything at all. All of our seeds are collected by us personally. This year, particularly on this picture, I could walk through that greenhouse and I could tell you exactly where each of those plants, where their seeds were sourced from, because I was, for 80% of that, I was the one that collected them. And I'm going to, let's say, nature conservancy lands, prairie remnants. We have our own prairie remnant here at the farm. There is just a large biodiversity out in these prairie remnants that you can collect some stuff from. You just have to know what you're looking for, really. This is our butterfly milkweed a bit further on into the year. Again, all of these seeds here, I mean, that's just in this photo here, that's over 400 butterfly milkweed in this tiny spot, and they're grown from genetics from our very own prairie remnant here on the farm. Let's look at, on the left side here, that's actually butterfly milkweed again, and I just wanted to highlight the scientific name for it is Asclepias tuberosa, and you can kind of see this big potato-looking tuber, and you can see where I get this name from. I particularly like Asclepias tuberosa quite a bit because it's a very good Oklahoma drought plant. It's had these adaptations to really withstand these dry periods because it has this backup reserve first and foremost for those dry periods. And then if you look at the stem of it, I don't know if you can see some of it here, maybe, oh yeah, right here on this far right one here, you can see all those hairs along the stems, and they're on the leaves as well. And those are adaptations to very dry and humid environments, because once those UV rays hit those hairs, it sort of dissipates some of the heat. Whenever you're just hitting the foliage direct, it's a lot more harsh. So I'm a big fan of this plant. Very easy to grow as well. I haven't had any problems growing this plant out. In the middle there, Lobelia cardinalis again, just showing it further along, and a very nice bright white root system. On the right side there, there's swamp milkweed. Swamp milkweed was one of the cool ones to go out and work with the tribes, because I was able to go out to I was working with some Cherokee Nation members over in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and I collected a lot of swamp milkweed in Tahlequah, pretty close to the town from these areas I used to do botanical classes from. And it was cool to be able to go back there and give them, 200 swamp milkweeds, and I could tell them exactly where those milkweed were collected from, wild genetics. And so it's a lot more fulfilling that way than saying, oh, I just ordered these from, some nursery in Minnesota or whatever. These are buttonbush, Cephalanthus occidentalis, sort of a true wetland plant. Anywhere you go, if you're in a true wetland, you're going to run into this plant. You'll see it all along pond edges and such. Loves the wet feet. Just keep it moist. And look how tall those are. And then look at the deep cell height there. So you can keep these things and grow them to a respectable size in these deep cells. These obviously need to be would be much happier on the ground, but if you can't get around to it, these plants are very, very tough. I would always, it sort of seems backwards, but if you're going to try to start your own garden, it's almost easier to do some of these native plants because they're just so tough and they're used to this heat comparatively. If you try to go buy seeds from Lowe's or Home Depot and try to grow those out, you're getting stuff from Asia and Europe where the climate is just massively different. And so after they get these buttonbush got moved out here, you can kind of see them in the background a bit, kind of hidden, but we'll move them out. Jane mentioned once they're in the greenhouse, you want to move them and get them exposed to the wind, get them exposed to the direct sunlight. Otherwise, if you take something from the greenhouse and plant it directly into the ground, you'll typically see your plant start to wilt a bit because it's under a lot of stress. So you have to ease them into it. So you take them from the greenhouse, leave them outside for about a week, keep them watered, and then they should be ready to plant. And this is sort of an example of one of the 50 deep cells mixed tray that we would, supply to the tribes here. And what's great about working with the tribes is that we can teach them this stuff and they can come back on their own and organize their own planting. So that's what happened here. We worked extensively with this one tribal member of the Creek Nation, and she was always at our events, still comes to all our events, is really one of our pioneers for the work we do. But it's really cool for her to just be able to come and pick up stuff for us because I have to be at the farm and water and stuff, so I can't be out planting stuff every single day. I would love to, but I do have some work here, so it's really great for these pioneers that I know how to do. They know how to do these plantings in a successful way and care for the plants, so they can come by, pick up a tray of 50, and then the next day they have a little get together with their tribe, and then they can plant out all 50 just in an hour or less. Cloning.
Brandon, I'm so sorry to interject. If I could just have you pause for a moment.
Yeah.
We'd like to have a couple minutes to answer some questions that came in through the chat, and then we can check with Marilyn to see if we can extend a couple more minutes after the hour.
Sure.
So again, I apologize. I don't want to curtail anyone's presentation, but there were a couple questions that came in. Is that okay for you? Okay, so just a couple of questions that came in through the chat. One is, what is the best way for folks outside tribal communities to support TAB's work? Jane, do you want to field that one?
There we go.
Jane, oh, there you go.
Okay, do I have it? Okay, sorry, it said the host was not allowing me to unmute myself. So yeah, so this is a whole part of our mission, is to provide that space for native and non-native entities to engage for this work. As I said, man, we need you, you need us. It's and Brandon's, I guess, can't unmute himself either, but so we always need we need people to host stuff. We need people to help us with seed collection efforts. We need volunteers. There's a huge amount of, everything from bringing in trainers with native plant expertise to if people can just even volunteer with some of the other like admin tasks. I mean, we're a tiny little staff. There's pretty much, there's only 3 people that are paid staff. That we've got a lot of volunteers, but not a lot. We've got some volunteers and some, but we're just we're trying to do a lot. So we've got a website, we've got a Facebook page. Reach out to us. You can email Brandon at any time, or Colin, or other. Brandon can probably put the contact information in the chat box. but yeah, we can always do that. And then if nothing else, if you'd ever like to contribute, we are based at the Learning Center at the UC Butterfly Farm, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And so we can take donations that are fully tax deductible, and you can earmark your what your donation, what you want it to be for, whether it's providing funding for a workshop or providing funding to go out and doing some restoration work. You know, that's what helps us to keep going and to be able to keep this stuff free for the folks we need. So I think Brandon's put that in there, but please go. We've got the triballiancesforpollinators.com website. There's also a website for Learning Center at the UC Butterfly Farm. And then we've got a Facebook page as well. So we would love your help, please. We'd appreciate it.
Great, thank you. And when I was looking at your website, there's a membership area. Now, is that a general membership, or is that membership for tribal collaborators?
Okay, so we've got a 2-tier system. So there's members for tribal, there's a membership track for people that are either work for tribes or they're, you know, or they're tribal members looking to restore their land. We also have associate members, I guess, the allies, and so then you can get on that. You can get all of our emails, our you know, notifications about our webinars, all of that stuff, all of our news, if you sign up as an associate member. And if somebody said to me one time at Creek Nation from actually a different department, but it stuck with me. She said, yeah, we need allies, but more than that, we need accomplices, folks that are going to help us get the work done. So we appreciate your allyship, but we'd love you to be our accomplice in trying to do this restoration work as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are at the end of the hour. There are a couple more questions here. And I think that probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to forward these questions to you, Jane and Brandon, to answer. And then I can include your answers in the follow-up email that's going to go out to everyone who is here today. We try to keep the webinars to, you know, just make sure some people have to go write it too. So I think that's the direction that we're going to go. Sorry, we couldn't get to everything, but this presentation has just been fantastic. There were comments coming in throughout the chat of support and excitement, and folks really glad to be getting this learning and this insight from you both. So thank you so much for joining us today. Again, this is recorded and will be available for everyone to watch in about 2 to 3 weeks on the Monarch Joint Venture and NCTC websites. And I will send follow-up email. And we hope that you'll join us next month for next month's webinar on March 22nd, which is titled Roadsides as Habitat for Monarchs, a Great Opportunity or a Salty Death Trap. We have Emily Snell-Rude presenting next month from the University of Minnesota, who has made roadside habitat the focus of her work. I'll put in the link to register now. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jane and Brandon.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we ran long. Brandon and I are both famously long-winded when we start talking about this stuff, so I apologize. But thank you so much. It was an honor to be here, and thank you, MJV, for really launching this whole thing. Without your initial grant, this would not have happened. So thank you very much for all your support.
Thank you all. See you next month.
Thank you.